Captain Charles Daniels strode down the dimly lit corridor of the Terran Defense Force flagship, the TDF Indomitable. His heavy footfalls echoed off the metal walls as he made his way to the R&D lab. The message from Dr. Rahim had been cryptic but urgent, a breakthrough in exoskeleton technology that Charles needed to see immediately. As the door to the lab slid open with a pneumatic hiss, Charles was greeted by the excited face of Dr. Nasir Rahim. The scientist's dark eyes sparkled with barely contained enthusiasm. "Captain Daniels, thank the stars you're here. We've done it. The Chimera exosuit is ready for field testing. This is going to change everything." Charles raised an eyebrow. The NSRs and Krell have had powered armor for decades. What makes this so special? Nasir grinned. "We cracked the Anarian data cache. Their biomechanical interface technology is light years beyond anything else out there. Combined with our own breakthroughs in synthetic musculature and onboard AI, well, you'll have to see it to believe it." The scientist led Charles over to a hulking, humanoid form shrouded under a gray tarp. With a flourish, Nasir pulled away the covering to reveal the Chimera in all its deadly glory. Charles let out a low whistle. The exoskeleton was a marvel of sleek lines and brutal functionality. Midnight black composite plating covered a frame of rippling synthetic muscle fibers. Integrated weapons systems bristled from the suit's arms and shoulders, but it was the helmet that drew Charles's gaze. A featureless obsidian visor that seemed to stare into his very soul. Impressive, but how do we know it actually works? I'm not sending my Marines into battle with untested gear. Nasir's grin widened. That's the best part. The onboard AI learns and adapts to each user, optimizing performance in real time. The more you fight in the Chimera, the better it gets. It's almost symbiotic. Charles frowned. "You're telling me this thing can think for itself? I don't like the sound of that." No, nothing so drastic," Nasir assured him. "The AI simply interprets the user's intentions and enhances their natural abilities. It's not sentient, just highly intuitive." The captain stepped closer to the exoskeleton, running a hand over its matte black surface. He could feel the barely restrained power thrumming beneath his fingertips. "All right, I'm intrigued, but I'll be the judge of its capabilities. Suit me up, Doc. Let's see what this beast can do." 15 minutes later, Charles stood in the center of the lab's testing range, encased from head to toe in the Chimera exosuit. The HUD glowed to life before his eyes, feeding him a constant stream of data. Biometrics, threat assessments, targeting reticles. It was almost overwhelming at first, but he quickly adjusted as the AI synced with his neural implant. "Begin combat simulation," Nasir called out from the control booth. Starting with baseline human performance. A dozen holographic targets winked into existence around Charles, armed and armored figures representing the average soldier. Time seemed to slow as the Chimera fed combat stimulants into his bloodstream and boosted his reflexes to superhuman levels. Charles surged forward, a black blur of composite and steel. His armored fist caved in the chest of the first target, sending holographic gore splattering across the deck. He spun, lashing out with a kick that decapitated another simulated foe. The AI guided his movements, transforming Charles into a whirlwind of calculated violence. In less than 30 seconds, the testing range was littered with the broken bodies of the holographic enemies. Charles stood amid the carnage, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts. He hadn't even broken a sweat. "Incredible," Nasir breathed over the comms. A 1,250% increase in combat effectiveness compared to unaugmented human baseline. And that's just the beginning. The scientist's voice took on a note of barely restrained glee. "Let's see how the Chimera stacks up against the NSRs and Krell, shall we?" The testing range shimmered and reformed into a war-torn cityscape. Towering reptilian NSR and insectoid Krell soldiers appeared, clad in their signature-powered armor. They immediately opened fire on Charles, with a blistering barrage of plasma bolts and razor-sharp shuriken. But the Chimera was already in motion, its onboard AI plotting optimal evasion paths, and guiding Charles through a series of impossibly agile maneuvers. Plasma fire splashed harmlessly against the exoskeleton's energy shielding as Charles closed the distance to his foes. He slammed into the first NSR. Like a meteor, the sheer kinetic force crumpling the alien's armored carapace like tinfoil. Charles's armored fist pummeled the reptilian warrior, reducing it to a broken heap. In seconds, the Krell were more agile, darting and weaving around Charles in an attempt to flank him. But the Chimera's predictive algorithms were always one step ahead. Charles spun and leaped, his movements a blur of preternatural speed and precision. Razor-sharp blades extended from his gauntlets, slicing through chitin and steel with equal ease. In a matter of minutes, the simulated battlefield was strewn with the shattered remains of the alien soldiers. Charles stood victorious, the Chimera's armor barely scratched. Nasir's voice crackled over the comms, thick with awe. That was, a 400% increase in effectiveness against NSR and Krell forces. It's unheard of. Charles flexed his armored fingers, marveling at the raw power at his command. The Chimera is a game-changer, Doc. With this suit, we might actually stand a chance against those alien bastards. The captain's mind raced with the possibilities. The Terran Defense Force had been on the back foot for too long, steadily losing ground to the relentless onslaught of the NSR-Krell alliance. But with the Chimera exosuit, humanity finally had a weapon to even the odds. We need to get this thing into mass production ASAP, Charles declared. I want a full company of Chimera-equipped Marines ready for deployment within the month. Nasir nodded eagerly. Absolutely, Captain. I'll get my team working on streamlining the manufacturing process immediately. The aliens won't know what hit them. As Charles strode out of the lab, still encased in the midnight black armor, he couldn't help but feel a surge of primal satisfaction. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. With the Chimera exosuit, humanity would show the galaxy what it meant to be built different. The NSR, the Krell, and any other alien bastards who stood in their way would learn to fear the unstoppable might of the human race. It was time to take the fight to the enemy, and this time they would win. The TDF Indomitable shuddered as another volley of plasma fire slammed into its hull. Alarms blared, and crewmen shouted as they rushed to contain the damage. On the bridge, Captain Charles Daniels gripped the command console, his knuckles white with tension. Status report, he barked. Shields at 30%, Captain, the tactical officer replied, his voice strained. We can't take much more of this. On the view screen, a massive NSR dreadnought loomed, its reptilian hull bristling with weapons. Swarms of Krell fighters darted around it like angry hornets, harassing the Indomitable's defenses. Charles gritted his teeth. The ambush had caught them off guard, deep in enemy territory. The Indomitable was a formidable ship, but even it couldn't stand against the combined might of the NSR Krell fleet. Sir, we're being hailed, the comms officer reported, a note of surprise in her voice. It's the NSR flagship. Charles's eyes narrowed. On screen, the view screen flickered, resolving into the scarred visage of an NSR warlord. The alien's reptilian features twisted into a cruel approximation of a smile. Surrender, human, the warlord hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. Your pathetic ship is no match for the might of the NSR Imperium. Lay down your arms, and we may grant you a swift death. Charles leaned forward, his voice dripping with contempt. I've got a counteroffer, you scaly bastard. Why don't you slither back to whatever hole you crawled out of before I shove a nuke so far up your ass, you'll be plasma for a week. The NSR warlord recoiled, his eyes blazing with fury. Insolent primate, you dare mock the Imperium? I will flay the flesh from your bones and feast on your still-beating heart. You'll have to catch me first, Charles roared, a feral grin spreading across his face. Helm, bring us about. We're going straight down that bastard's throat. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but they obeyed without hesitation. The Indomitable surged forward, its engines flaring as it hurtled towards the NSR dreadnought. Captain, we're being targeted by the enemy flagship's main cannon. the tactical officer warned, panic creeping into his voice. Charles's grin only widened. Good. That's exactly what I wanted. He slammed his hand down on the comms panel. Chimera team, you are go for launch. Give them hell. Boys. Deep in the bowels of the Indomitable, a dozen armored figures stirred to life. The Chimera exosuits, sleek and deadly, gleamed under the harsh lights of the launch bay. Sergeant Greg Kane, callsign Titan, flexed his gauntlet fingers in anticipation. You heard the captain, he growled, his voice distorted by the suit's external speakers. Time to show these alien freaks what humans are made of. Chimera team, move out. The launch bay doors yawned open, revealing the chaotic maelstrom of the space battle beyond. Plasma fire and debris whipped past as the Indomitable hurtled towards the NSR flagship. Titan and his team leaped into the void, the Chimera suit's thrusters flaring to life. They shot forward, dodging and weaving through the storm of fire with preternatural agility. The NSR gunners, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human warriors, struggled to track the darting figures. But the chimeras were too fast, too agile. They closed the distance to the enemy flagship in seconds, landing on its hull with bone-jarring force. Breach and clear, Titan ordered, his suit's onboard AI already highlighting structural weaknesses in the NSR ship's armor. The Chimera team went to work, their armored fists and integrated weapons tearing through the hull like tissue paper. They plunged into the heart of the enemy vessel, a whirlwind of calculated violence and destruction. NSR warriors rushed to meet them, plasma rifles blazing, but they were no match for the chimeras. Titan and his team cut through the aliens like a hot knife through butter, their suits enhanced strength and speed rendering the NSR's defenses useless. They fought their way to the ship's reactor core, a seething mass of plasma and exotic energies. Titan placed a series of demo charges, their timers counting down with merciless precision. Charges set, he reported, his voice calm amidst the chaos. Time to bail, chimeras. We've got 30 seconds before this whole place goes supernova. The team blasted their way back out of the ship, leaving a trail of shattered NSR bodies in their wake. They burst from the hull just as the demo charges detonated, the reactor core going critical with a blinding flash. The NSR flagship exploded, a miniature sun blooming in the void. The shockwave caught the nearby Krell fighters, tossing them like leaves in a hurricane. The Indomitable, safely out of range, rode out the blast with barely a shudder. On the bridge, the crew erupted into cheers. Charles allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, watching as the remnants of the enemy fleet scattered and fled. Damn fine work, chimeras, he said over the comms, his voice filled with pride. Damn fine work, indeed. As Titan and his team soared back towards the Indomitable, the sergeant couldn't help but marvel at the sheer power of the Chimera exosuits. With these armored wonders, humanity finally had a chance to turn the tide against the alien menace. The NSR and Krell had underestimated the ingenuity and tenacity of the human race. They had thought them weak, easy prey for their conquering armies, but they were wrong. Humanity was built different, and with the chimeras at their side, they would show the galaxy just how different they could be. It was time to take the fight to the enemy, and this time they would win. The NSR homeworld was a blasted hellscape, its surface scarred by the ravages of war. Towering spires of alien architecture jutted from the rubble, their once gleaming surfaces now pitted and scorched. The skies above roiled with sickly green clouds, heavy with the stench of death and decay. Captain Charles Daniels surveyed the scene from the cockpit of his dropship, his face etched with grim determination. This was it, the final push, the last stand against the NSR Imperium. If they could take the enemy capital, the war would be as good as won. Chimera team, sound off, he barked into the comms. One by one, the armored figures in the dropship's hold reported in. Titan, Raven, Ghost, Hammer, the best of the best. The most lethal warriors humanity had to offer, each one encased in the unbreakable might of the Chimera exosuit, ready to bring the fight to the enemy's doorstep. Listen up, people, Charles said, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. This is it, the end of the line. We take the NSR capital today or we die trying. There is no middle ground, no surrender, no retreat. We are the tip of the spear, the vanguard of humanity, and we will not fail. The chimeras nodded, their faces set with steely resolve. They knew the stakes, the price of failure, but they were ready, willing to lay down their lives for the cause. The dropship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere, the hull glowing cherry red with the heat of re-entry. Flak burst around them, the NSR's last-ditch defenses trying in vain to keep the invaders at bay. But it was too little, too late. The dropship plummeted through the clouds, its engines screaming as it hurtled towards the surface. The chimeras braced themselves, their suits inertial dampeners straining to compensate for the bone-crushing forces. With a thunderous roar, the dropship slammed into the ground, kicking up a massive plume of dust and debris. The ramp lowered and the chimeras charged out, weapons at the ready. The NSR capital was a maze of twisted metal and shattered stone. The once proud buildings reduced to little more than rubble. The aliens had made their last stand here, determined to fight to the bitter end. And fight they did. NSR warriors swarmed out of the ruins, their plasma rifles spitting fire. Krell assassins darted from shadow to shadow, their monomolecular blades thirsting for human blood. But the chimeras were unstoppable, a force of nature given form. They plowed through the enemy ranks like a tidal wave, their armored fists and integrated weapons dealing death with every blow. Titan led the charge, his suit's AI painting targets and plotting optimal paths through the chaos. He was a whirlwind of destruction, his movements a blur of speed and precision. NSRs fell before him like wheat before the scythe, their broken bodies littering the ground. Raven and Ghost worked in tandem, their suits' cloaking systems rendering them all but invisible. They struck from the shadows, taking out key targets with ruthless efficiency. Hammer brought up the rear, his suit's heavy weaponry laying down a blistering barrage of suppressive fire. Together, the chimeras fought their way deeper into the city, their objective clear. The NSR Imperial Palace, the seat of the enemy's power. If they could take the palace, the Imperium would crumble. But the aliens were desperate, throwing everything they had at the invaders. Massive war machines lumbered out of the ruins, their armor plating thick enough to shrug off even the chimera's heaviest weapons. Genetically engineered abominations, all teeth and claws and fury, charged into the fray, their howls echoing off the shattered buildings. The chimeras fought on, their suits' energy reserves dwindling with every passing minute. They were running on fumes, pushed to the very limit of their endurance. But they would not falter. They could not. The fate of humanity rested on their armored shoulders. With a final, desperate push, they breached the palace walls, storming into the heart of the enemy stronghold. The NSR Emperor himself awaited them, a towering figure clad in ornate battle armor. The Emperor was a formidable foe, his strength and speed enhanced by advanced cybernetics. He met the chimeras head-on, his energy blade flashing in the dim light. Titan engaged him, the two warriors locked in a deadly dance of steel and plasma. They traded blows, the Emperor's blade scoring deep gouges in Titan's armor. But the sergeant fought on, his suit's AI adapting to the Emperor's fighting style with every passing second. In the end, it was the Emperor's own arrogance that proved his undoing. He underestimated the tenacity of the human spirit, the sheer unstoppable will of the chimeras. Titan saw his opening and struck, his armored fist slamming into the Emperor's chest with the force of a runaway train. The Emperor staggered back, his armor cracked and sparking. Titan pressed the advantage, raining down blows with relentless fury. The Emperor's defenses crumbled, his cybernetics failing one by one. With a final, shattering blow, Titan sent the Emperor flying, his broken body smashing through the palace walls. The NSR leader lay still, his reign of terror at an end. Titan stood over the fallen Emperor, his armor battered and scorched, but still intact. Around him, the chimeras gathered, their faces lined with exhaustion, but alight with the fire of victory. Captain Charles Daniels, voice crackled over the comms, thick with emotion. You did it. Chimeras. You saved us all. The NSR Imperium is no more. Their homeworld, ours. Humanity is safe, thanks to your courage and sacrifice. Titan looked out over the ruined city, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. They had won, but at a terrible cost. So many lives lost, so much destruction wrought. But it was worth it. It had to be. For the future of humanity, for the chance to build a better tomorrow. The chimeras had shown the galaxy what humans were made of. They had proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that humanity was built different, that they would never surrender, never back down in the face of adversity. They were unstoppable, unbreakable, the masters of their own destiny. And with the power of the chimera exosuits at their command, they would forge a new path among the stars, a path of exploration, of discovery, of endless possibility. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was just the way they liked it.